Welcome to Elevate Your Mind, your number one podcast for peak performance strategies that will enhance your mindset, develop your emotional skill set, and maybe, just maybe, be the catalyst to create positive forward momentum in your life. Here's what's to come from today's pod.
And I said to her, look, people will dabble in surface level things to avoid deeper emotional pains. I'll say that again for you. People will dabble in surface level things to avoid deeper emotional pains. Boom, and we are live. Guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today, this particular episode is all going to be around your emotions, funnily enough, and it is all going to be around the fact that you don't have emotions. You do emotions. Not only do you do them, you use emotions. You use them depending on what you deem to be emotionally appropriate to use at any given time. And I'm going to tell you now, this is going to transcend the way that you see how emotions work within your psyche, within your being. So I really recommend you tune into me here, whether you are on your commute to work, whether you're watching this on your lunch break, whether you're taking notes, whatever it may be here, I recommend that you seriously tune into this, because when you can understand this concept, you can really understand exactly why you do what you do. And for this, I'm going to give you two drastically different emotions here. I'm going to use confidence and anxiety as an example, because you see, with both of these, you don't have confidence, you don't have anxiety. We say these things, but we say these things because we don't know why we feel the way that we do. You know, people say things like, I've lost my confidence, or I have anxiety, or I've gained my confidence back, or my anxiety is becoming worse, whatever it may be. It's not that at all. We are doing these things, but more often than not, we are using them. And let me explain this for you, because when you can understand this and as I say, you really grasp this concept, you can really take control of, right, well, if I'm using that particular emotion and I don't like that emotion, how can I use this emotion instead? Because if I can use this emotion, those of you with me on YouTube now, you can see that I'm gesturing to my left here. If I can use this separate emotion over here, instead of this different emotion over here, I'm going to get a completely different outcome in this area. Okay? Because let's start with this. Let's start with the anxious trait as an example. Well, we've covered many times the reasons why you don't have these emotions. You do them, and we spoke about that many times as well, and the fact that, you know, you use your body, your focus, your words. It's serving a deeper need, it's serving a deeper purpose for you to do these emotions, like anxiety. But you see, why do we use them? Well, here's the thing. All of this is an unconscious response. None of us are manipulative, I don't believe, enough to be able to want to make ourselves feel bad because we know that we're going to use it in a deeper way. No, like, it's just backwards. I don't think anyone really does that. So you see, all of this is an unconscious emotional response of how we act. But here's the thing. I'll give you two examples recently of people who I have worked with and the context of this, so you can see the frameworks of how this works. Someone who I've been working with of late, they are in a particular relationship, and in that particular relationship there is some uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. There's some uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. And in having these uncomfortable, this was someone I was working with now, let me think, probably 3 months ago. In the uncomfortable conversation that needed to be had, this person was saying how, you know, it could affect their situation with work, it could affect their home life, it could affect their financial situation, it could affect their kids' situation. And they had all these reasons of why having this uncomfortable conversation was going to, produce some uncertainty emotionally in their life. And I said, okay. And I said, so why are you here with me? Why are you here? They said, because I'm struggling with anxiety. I said, okay. And I'm grinning now because I said, oh, okay, because I saw the pattern straight away. I said, and tell me, what is it about these anxious traits? And this person said, well, you know, I just feel like anxious with being at work and, you know, being in that environment around work and dealing with the work demands at the moment. And even sometimes when I start driving, I can feel really anxious in that way. I said, oh, okay, with you. And I said, tell me, like, why is it that work or driving, why is that getting you down? And she was like, I don't know why it's getting me down, because, you know, I can't put my finger on it. I've always driven, I've always gone to work, it's always been completely fine in my life. It's been no issues with that. And I said, oh, okay. And I was like, and tell me, when you feel anxious about work and when you feel anxious about driving, what else can you think about? She was like, nothing. I literally can't think of anything else, Matt. It just consumes me. And I said, and there is your answer. Because 10 minutes ago, you told me about this uncomfortable thing that you need to deal with and that is really going to uplift and change some momentum in your life, in your finances, in your home life, in your living situation, in all of these things that you told me about. And so this trait of anxiousness you are using as a conscious distraction for you when you know there's no real thing at work, you know there's no real thing in driving, but because the underlying thing here is causing some uncertainty, you are using more of a surface level avenue here that you can try to take control of, I beg your pardon. You can try to deal with up here on a more of a surface level to stop yourself dealing with the deeper rooted thing. She looked at me. I said, does this make sense? And I'm saying to you, does this make sense? Because she looked at me and, you know, when you're, not working with someone, but you know when you're talking to someone and they don't say anything, but you can see the cogs turning in their mind? This was happening. And I said to her, look, people will dabble in surface level things to avoid deeper emotional pains. I'll say that again for you. People will dabble in surface level things to avoid deeper emotional pains. Because if I can deal with this up here, if I'm too busy, quote unquote, being anxious about all of this stuff up here and all of this surface level stuff, and I'm too busy getting caught up in this and all my emotions, I haven't got time to think about the fact that I need to have that important conversation with my partner. Because I'm too busy dealing with this. And so then I make this thing up here a big issue, and I use this emotion up here to make this a big issue, because then it's going to stop me from dealing with the deeper thing down here. Now, the deeper thing doesn't mean deep rooted like it's been there for 20, 30 years. It can mean that, but it means just the deeper emotional thing in your life. The thing that requires a little bit more energy, effort and emotion from you, that generally as human beings we try to avoid. It's interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting. Because you see, when I explained this to her, life transformed, because I worked with her, and as I say, I said to her, so from this context, can you see how you're not only doing this, but you're using this emotion? Not consciously, but you're using this to distract you from dealing with this thing over here. Whilst you're so busy getting immersed in this anxious trait, it's keeping you away from this. It's actually serving a purpose in your life. She said, yeah, I can completely see. So she was like, but it doesn't change anything, Matt. What do I do now? I was like, well, why don't you use the emotion of confidence instead? She said, what do you mean? I said, why don't you use the emotion of confidence? I've brought this to your conscious mind now, how you can see that you are using the emotion of anxiety. You're using it. You don't have it, it's not this illness or virus or disorder or condition People get told this all the time, honestly. Nightmare. No, it's simply not the case. You're using it. She said, yeah, I can see that now, Matt. You know, I've had a couple of sessions, I can completely get this. I went, great. So why don't you use a different emotion? I said, okay. And I said, do you think, and I said to her honestly, do you think if you dealt with the main thing in play here, do you think these traits would stick around? She looked at me, she went, oh, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, ask yourself, if you did know, do you really think they would stick around? Because everything I've just said to you in this session, by now is about 45 minutes in. I said everything in this session you've told me has made complete sense. So do you really think that if you dealt with this thing that you know is true and you know is real and you dealt with that, do you really think that this thing would show up anymore? She was like, well, I couldn't be sure, Matt, but honestly, I don't think it would, because it's never been an issue before. It's only been since, you know, I'd realised that I've had to do these types of things, and then I tried to distract myself, and then I got a bit worried in the car once, and now I've made that into a big thing. And she said I got worried at work once, it was on the same day, and because I was thinking about this thing. I was like, okay, cool, it's a great acknowledgement. So here's the thing, we need to teach you, I need to show you how to use confidence to deal with this thing instead. Because if I can show you how to use confidence, and at this stage of the program, for any of you listening to this, you know that we do this quite early on about being in a more empowered state, feeling more confident, feeling more in control. When I can show you how to use this in this area now, dealing with the deeper emotional thing, the rest of this will disappear. You know, people spend a lifetime, all health anxiety, driving anxiety, flying anxiety, you know, agoraphobia, OCD, contamination, whatever it may be, medical. There's 1,001 things. Dabbling in these surface level things. No. When you go straight underneath, this is what I do with people. I recognize the pattern. I see what lies underneath and I deal with that. Change can happen fast, because we're not dabbling in all the surface level presenting things. I'm understanding of those. I like to know those for context, but then I'm listening and I'm hearing what lies underneath, because I can save you years off your life, months, years off your life, dabbling in all these other different areas. Just get to the crux of it. Get to the crux of it, you deal with the rest of it. And so within this, as I say, we never have emotions. We do them, excuse me, voice broke. We do them, and more importantly, when you can see this context, we use them. Because some of you listening to this now or watching me here, you all have been internalizing this and going, oh, yeah, you know what? I have got that to deal with, I've got that to deal with, I've got that to deal with, I've got that to deal with, and I'm getting caught up in all of this driving or in all of this health or in all of this, and I know there's nothing wrong consciously, I know there's nothing wrong, Matt, but this is why I'm hitting. No, save your energy, stop focusing on that, deal with the thing that's underneath. Because when we can do this, I can ask you, how can you use confidence? Well, I don't know, Matt. Okay, we'll move past that. Do you know what I mean? This is what I call the lazy brain. Oh, I don't know, just tell me. It's the lazy brain talking. How do you use confidence? Well, think about it now. When you're confident, how do you use your body? What do you focus on? How do you talk to yourself? Do you talk to yourself softly and with open-ended questions? Or do you talk to yourself affirmatively with strong statements when you feel confident? Do you hold yourself in a strong and empowered way? Or do you sort of sit behind it? Do you support yourself or do you beat yourself up? Do you command yourself into action or do you think about taking action? Because if you start to answer these types of questions for yourself, how do I use confidence? And if you want to use this, think about times in your life when you felt supremely confident, and it will follow a similar pattern. Because when you start to do that, what you can start to do is use the confidence that you want to start to build, what you want to start to grow, the muscle of confidence, because all emotions, they're like muscles. If you don't use them, they weaken. You know, people always say the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. Now, you don't lose it completely, but what you do is you get that muscle weak. We want strong muscles of the ones that we want. So use them, build them up. And you might, by doing things, this can make me more confident. I'm going to follow through in this state with this empowerment. I'm going to use this trait in this area. Oh, I find that a bit uncomfortable. But you know what? Let me use these emotions. Let me use this feeling of confidence to take on this particular challenge now. Let me use this feeling of confidence to take on this particular challenge. And before you know it, you'll be going, you know what? I'm going to have that conversation with my partner. I'm going to have that conversation because I'm using this more often than not. And now's the time when if I don't do it now, then I never will. And you'll deal with that thing. And guess what? You'll be driving. You won't be worrying about health. You won't be worrying about work. You won't be dealing in the surface level things anymore, because all of these things are just welcome distractions for you emotionally. You know, when people talk about this type of thing, they talk about things from a conscious perspective and they try and distract themselves consciously. You know where people sometimes get? People, and try and stay with me on this here, if you can visualize this. You have the depth of where we are, which is like the main thing we need to deal with. So what they do is they use anxiety to distract themselves from the main thing, like what we've just discussed here. But then what they do is they try to then distract themselves consciously from the use of anxiety, where anxiety is already distracting and being used to distract themselves from a deeper thing. And people get in this constant loop of distraction, and then they never know where they are. Some of you will be able to resonate with this. I'll say this again. They have something that, you know, is probably needs dealing with, or it requires their energy, it requires their effort, it requires their emotion, it's a bit of a challenge in their life, and we all face challenge on a day-to-day basis. I'm no different in that. But you see, they use anxiety to try and keep themselves away from it. But then because they meddle in anxiety and then they're consciously like, oh no, I'm dealing with this thing now, then they use other techniques or distractions to try and deal with the anxiety. And it's like, this is why people become mentally and emotionally drained. And trust me, I lived that life for years. So I was the king of that. I used to call myself the king masker. When I say used to, this was like in the last couple of years. I did call myself the king masker, because I was brilliant at masking over identities. You know, I was a professional footballer. For those of you who are new here to listening to me, I was a professional footballer for 8 years. Played for some good clubs, played for some great clubs, played for some crap clubs, I'll be honest with you as well. So you see, I was a professional footballer, masked over the lot, presented this air of confidence and whatever it may be, but really I was trying to use different emotions to stop myself from dealing with the deeper thing underneath. Because you see, I used to produce this, and ultimately I had deeper things underneath that I wouldn't deal with, that I wouldn't actually take control of. So what I would do is I would present and I would use quote unquote different feelings, different emotions to try and keep myself away from dealing with the things underneath. A lot of the times I would use anxiety, and then I'd have to try and paper over anxiety with a different mask. Jeez Louise. And you know, I found myself in a muddle, and then I'd dabble in football things and this and that and everything that I would do and try and mask over all of these. And I was the king masker, because I knew exactly, okay, if I'm wearing that mask, I can use this emotion to mask over that. And if I'm wearing that mask, I can use this. And it was like, oh. I know some of you listening to this have probably been in similar situations. I come back to my point. You don't have these emotions. You do them and you use them depending on what you deem to be appropriate. Some of you, up until now, have deemed it appropriate to use the trait of anxiety to your benefit because it distracts you from the deeper thing, whatever the deeper thing is. The deeper doesn't mean, let's be clear, the deeper doesn't mean the childhood issue when you were 5 years old and you fell off the swing. Your mum was facing the other way, your dad was reading the newspaper, and that means you're abandoned. No, like, you'll go to therapy and this is like, oh, this means that you weren't loved. Oh, I didn't actually think that, but thanks for telling me. Like, it's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the core things in our life that need dealing with. And see, when we can start to understand this, we can start to use other emotions, use emotions of drive, of confidence, of ambition, of commitment, of passion, of purpose. Use these emotions to deal with these things and just free ourselves from our life. Free ourselves from these areas. People dabble in surface level things to stop themselves dealing with deeper emotional pains. Another word for that is deeper emotional circumstances. It's what we all do. And you see, in the 20 minutes or so that I've spent here talking to you in this way, I was going to give you a couple of different frameworks for this, but I feel like this will have hit home for many of you, because this is something that I'm seeing more and more and more common, especially in today's day and age. We live in a surface level day and age. We live in a surface level day and age currently, you know, and what I mean by that is people are more interested in Instagram likes than they are the opinions of their close family and friends. People will dabble in the surface level thing. They want the surface level thing. It grips your attention, it grabs you. This is why the person was dealing with the driving and the thing, because it's the surface level thing, it's there and I get caught up. Also, they're using it to stop themselves over here. It's an interesting concept when you can get your head around it. Because when you can get your head around it, you can start to go, right, I can see how I've been doing this now. I've been so busy fighting and battling this trait and of emotion and of anxiety, but for what reason? And by the way, I'm saying anxiety here, it could be anything. People use stress, they use overwhelm, they use depression, people use emotions. You know, people come to me the other day and said, I have a chemical imbalance. I said, why do you have a chemical imbalance? She said, what do you mean, why? I said, exactly that. Why and how and what makes you think that you have a chemical imbalance? Well, I've done some research. Have you got any data to support the truth behind this? Well, no, what I've read on Google. Stop. You've read something on Google and now you've diagnosed yourself with a chemical imbalance. Come on, guys. Come on now. Let's not be... Honestly, some of the things out there, and it's no blame or shame on anyone. People that I've worked with, and worked with another guy recently, and he was in a very similar situation, and he'd read this and read that, and it's through no blame or shame, but the information is just untrue. People are inundated in information these days. Inundated in information. And they're starving, absolutely starving for application, implementation. That is everything that I'm about. For everyone that has ever, well, you see from these podcasts and you see from my work, that anyone who's ever worked with me, you know, everything I'm about is action. Why? Because knowledge is just, I spoke about it in the last episode, knowledge is just futile. We need actionable things. So within this now, make this actionable. Be truthful with yourself. Have the honest conversation with yourself. What is it that I'm using anxiety for? Now, don't get me wrong. If there is a, you know, this might be your true, deeper thing. It might be, for example, that you had a panic attack when you was, 5 years ago, as an example, and ever since then you found it difficult to go to the shopping centre. Okay, cool. That might be it might be everything else is fine in my life. I have a great husband, I have a great wife, I have great kids, I have a great mum, I have a great dad, I have a great home, I have great finances, So that might be your thing. Great. You're still using anxiety still. It's the same still applies. Your deeper thing, your deeper emotional pain might be the thing that you're actually dealing with. But you're still using it. Just because you did that one time 5 years ago doesn't mean that that's where you live today. You're still using the same mechanism that you did then. That's why you're producing the same result. Use other emotions. Use confidence instead. Override the pattern of the way that you go to that shopping mall. This is what I show people as well. Because when you can override that pattern, what I explained to you earlier about the body, the focus, the words, implement in that way. Like I spoke to you about last week in terms of using the certainty, the direction, the authority over your emotional part of your mind, not the conscious part of your mind. When you use this in that type of way, you start to override the pattern. You start to change the way that you internalize and you work when it comes to this particular area. But instead, I'm going to use anxiety because it's going to keep me away from going to that shopping centre again, and I don't want to do that, so it's going to keep me over here. Well, great. If you're happy with that, crack on. Who's anyone to tell you how to live otherwise? I'm just here to help people who want to break through and break free from what's holding them back. That is my life's mission. Help people break through and break free from what's holding them back. That's why I think that you're listening to my voice or watching me on YouTube right now, because there's a part of you that wants that. So therefore, do it. do it. Let's start to use the emotions of what we want. Use the resilience, use the drive, use this, not from the level of your head, from the level of your body, the level of your heart, the truth of you. You know, people are like, oh yeah, I tried. No, forget tried. Tried means I just put as much effort, energy and emotion in as what I want. I'll save that for another day. No, you don't try to do something, you do something or you don't do something. Use the emotions of what you want, the strength, the resilience, build that part of you up. Start small if you need to and start to build that muscle. Build the muscle, build the strength, the resilience, whatever emotion you want to use, start using that a lot more now. You know, if I haven't used confidence in 5 years and now all of a sudden I want to take on this big challenging thing in my life, and I barely use confidence as what it is, what makes me think that I've got the God-given right just to be able to tap into that emotion? Why would I possibly think that? I haven't used it in 5 years. Why do I just think it's gonna, that's gonna be as strong as what it was 5 years ago? I mean, come on, added to the fact that it's a challenge. It makes no sense when I position it in this way. And I told you at the start, this is gonna blow your mind with the way that I approach this, because people don't see it in this way. So I uncover the patterns and I relay them to you in a very relatable and easy way so you can action on them. Start to train and use the emotions that you want. You do not have emotions. You do and you use them. Use the ones that empower you. Start to detract, siphon through, take the legs from the emotions that you don't want. This is where you'll create a shift in your life. This is where you'll create breakthroughs. This is where you'll take yourself from feeling uncertain to unstoppable. That's why I created that program, because that's what it's all about. That 28-day program, that's what that's all about. I know this makes sense. I'm not even going to ask, does this make sense? I know it does. Go and action this in your life. Guys, if I can support you, if I can help you, if you want some of my advice or expertise in these areas, you know where to reach me. This is my life's mission. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep bringing you even more value. I've got so many more things. We're in December now. 2025 is coming and I've got so much I'm going to bring you. Pumps me up. I'm so excited. Guys, it is time to elevate your mind. Let's go do this.